You are thrust into the shadowed recesses of Nero's imperial bedchamber, the air cloying with the mingled scents of exotic perfumes and the faint, underlying sharpness of surgical ointments that fail to mask the metallic tang of recent bloodletting, as the emperor's fevered gaze fixes upon the trembling form of a young boy named Sporus, his delicate features contorted in silent agony from the fresh wounds of castration, forced into bridal veils that drape grotesquely over his mutilated body. While Nero whispers endearments once reserved for his slain wife, the scene promising revelations of intimate horrors that shatter the gilded myth of Roman grandeur. The Roman Emperor Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, who assumed the throne in 54 AD at the age of 17, initially captivated the empire with promises of enlightened governance, implementing tax relief for the provinces, sponsoring lavish public spectacles that drew crowds from across the Mediterranean, and commissioning architectural marvels that symbolized Rome's eternal dominance. Yet beneath this veneer of cultural patronage lurked a psychological abyss that would manifest in one of antiquity's most notorious scandals involving the boy Sporus, whose tragic fate exposed the festering underbelly of imperial depravity. Born into obscurity as a slave of uncertain origins, possibly from a freedman's household as suggested by Cassius Dio in his Roman history, Sporus entered historical record around 66 AD during Nero's extravagant tour of Greece, where the emperor, still haunted by the violent death of his second wife Poppaea, Sabina, the previous year, allegedly from a brutal kick to her pregnant abdomen amid a domestic rage, discovered in the boy's youthful countenance an eerie resemblance to the deceased empress, prompting a decision that blended morbid nostalgia with anatomical violation. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. As Nero's obsession deepened, the first shocking revelation emerged in the form of Sporus's forced castration, a procedure conducted by imperial physicians using crude surgical instruments of the era, bronze scalpels and cauterizing irons heated over flames, to excise the boy's testicles, preserving his prepubescent smoothness and preventing the onset of masculine traits. A practice rooted in the Roman tradition of pueri delicati, those cherished boy slaves selected for their beauty and maintained in a state of perpetual youth through such mutilations, as documented by Suetonius in his Lives of the 12 Caesars, where he notes the operation aimed to transform Sporus into a grotesque facsimile of womanhood. The air during the act thick with the acrid smoke of seared flesh and the boy's stifled cries echoing through the palace corridors. This anatomical reconfiguration, clinically akin to eunuchism prevalent in Eastern courts but scandalous in Roman elite circles for its subversion of gender norms, escalated into a public marriage ceremony in 67 AD, where Nero, adorned in matrimonial finery, paraded Sporus as his bride, complete with dowry, bridal veil, and a throng of attendants. The union consummated amid festivities that blurred the lines between imperial whim and societal outrage, Suetonius recounting how Nero treated him as his wife and addressed him with Poppaea's name, a psychological projection that modern analysis might interpret as a manifestation of unresolved grief intertwined with narcissistic personality traits, leading to increasingly disturbing displays where Sporus appeared at state banquets in empress regalia, his depilate body powdered with Venetian ceruse, a toxic lead-based cosmetic that caused skin lesions over time, and adorned with jewels that concealed the scars of his emasculation. Further revelations compounded the horror, as Nero's intimate dysfunctions extended beyond Sporus to include a prior marriage to the freedman Pythagoras in 64 AD, where the emperor assumed the bridal role, veiled and submissive, in a ceremony that inverted traditional Roman masculinity, the palace resounding with simulated wedding night cries as reported by Tacitus in his Annals, highlighting a pattern of gender fluidity that alienated the conservative senatorial class and fueled whispers of moral decay permeating the empire's core. The medical implications of such practices were profound, with castration often resulting in hormonal imbalances that led to osteoporosis, muscle atrophy, and psychological trauma, including depression and identity dissociation, conditions Sporus likely endured in silence as he navigated the treacherous dynamics of Nero's court, where reluctance could invite swift retribution. Contemporary observer accounts like those of Dio describing how the boy was compelled to adopt feminine mannerisms, his voice trained to mimic Poppaea's inflections through rigorous coaching by imperial tutors, while Nero's escalating paranoia, fueled perhaps by the neurotoxic effects of lead poisoning from aqueducts and cosmetics, manifested in jealous rages that endangered even his closest companions. Politically, these private aberrations seeped into public affairs, as Nero's preoccupation with Sporus diverted attention from governance, contributing to fiscal mismanagement that exacerbated the burdens on provincial taxpayers, with funds siphoned for lavish gifts to the boy, including a dedicated wardrobe mistress named Calvia Crispinilla, who oversaw his transformations. Her role emblematic of the court's complicity in maintaining the facade, while the scandal's ripple effects alienated key military factions, sowing seeds for the revolts that erupted in 68 AD across Gaul and Spain, led by figures like Galba, who decried Nero's effeminate excesses in diplomatic missives preserved in fragmentary form. Collateral damage extended to Sporus himself, whose victimhood as collateral in Nero's psychological unraveling mirrored the broader suffering of imperial spouses and subjects. Poppaea's own postpartum hemorrhage from Nero's assault a precursor to the boy's fate, while courtiers and servants bore witness reluctantly, their accounts filtering into historical records as veiled criticisms. One anonymous epigram circulating in Rome lamenting, "The world would have been happier had Nero's father married such a one," as quoted by Suetonius, underscoring the schadenfreude among the elite at the emperor's intimate humiliations. As Nero's condition worsened, desperate measures to sustain the illusion included repeated public affirmations of the marriage, with Sporus paraded in triumphal processions through Greece, his body subjected to further depilations using pumice and herbal poultices that irritated the skin, leading to festering sores concealed under layers of silk. The emperor's isolation intensifying as trusted advisors were executed on suspicions of disloyalty, his mind fracturing into hallucinatory episodes, where he conflated Sporus with divine apparitions. Modern psychological lenses suggesting elements of dissociative identity disorder exacerbated by the stresses of absolute power. The final collapse unfolded in June 68 AD amid widespread rebellions. Nero fleeing Rome to a suburban villa where, in his last hours, he turned to Sporus for ritual mourning, the boy compelled to lament as a widow while the emperor rehearsed suicide poses, ultimately requiring a servant's aid to slit his throat, his blood spurting in arterial arcs across the floor as he gasped qualis artifex perio. What an artist dies in me. According to Suetonius, the scene heavy with the fetid odor of impending death and unwashed desperation. Post-mortem revelations amplified the scandal, as Sporus's odyssey continued under subsequent rulers, first claimed by Nymphidius Sabinus, the Praetorian prefect who briefly aspired to the throne, treating the boy as Poppaea and attempting to legitimize his bid through association with Nero's legacy, only to be slain by his own guards. Dio recounting how Sporus was then taken by Emperor Otho in 69 AD, who had once vied for the real Poppaea, the irony stark as Otho paraded him in court before his own suicide after military defeat. The saga culminated under Vitellius, who planned to sacrifice Sporus in a gladiatorial reenactment of the rape of Proserpina, prompting the boy's suicide at around 20 years old to evade public degradation. His death a poignant erasure from history, with the Senate's damnatio memoriae against Nero extending to sanitize records of such unions. Yet preserved evidence in archaeological finds like inscribed rings and fragmentary papyri from Egypt confirm the boy's existence, while diplomatic correspondence from foreign envoys marveled at Rome's moral nadir. This intimate failure not only precipitated Nero's downfall, but reshaped Julio Claudian's succession, ushering the year of the four emperors and Flavian stability, a testament to how personal dysfunctions could destabilize empires. From Nero's theatrical depravities, the narrative transitions to another Roman scandal that eclipsed even Sporus' tragedy, involving Emperor Elagabalus, born Varius of Vitus Bassianus, who ascended the throne in 218 AD at 14 through his grandmother Julia Maece's intricate plotting against Macrinus. Initially heralded as a youthful restorer of Severan legitimacy, with military parades and senatorial acclamations that projected divine favor from the sun god Elagabal, yet concealed a vortex of gender and sexual experimentation that would unravel his brief reign. Elagabalus's primary aberration surfaced in his fanatical identification with femininity, soliciting physicians across the empire to perform rudimentary gender reassignment, offering half his treasury for a surgical incision to create female genitalia, as chronicled by Cassius Dio in his Roman history. The procedure involving perilous bronze tools and herbal anesthetics that risked fatal infection, his pleas reflecting a profound anatomical dysphoria blended with religious ecstasy. The palace, air thick with the pungent aromas of medicinal salves and incense burned to invoke divine approval. This quest for transformation escalated into public spectacles where Elagabalus appeared in women's attire, silk robes imported from Syria, heavy makeup of kohl and rouge that accentuated his youthful features, and wigs of human hair dyed in exotic hues, depilating his body with abrasive paste that caused raw, inflamed skin. Herodian noting in his history of the empire how the emperor preferred to be addressed as lady rather than lord, a subversion that horrified the traditionalist Praetorian Guard and Senate, who viewed such effeminacy as an Eastern corruption eroding Roman virtus. Further details revealed his marriages to men, including the charioteer Hierocles, a former slave elevated to Caesar's bedchamber, where Elagabalus assumed the wifely role, consummating the union in ceremonies that mimicked traditional nuptials. Dio, quoting the emperor's delight in being called Hierocles' wife and queen, the nights filled with the sounds of orchestrated passion that leaked to gossiping servants. While another union with Aurelius Zodicus, an athlete prized for his physical endowments, ended abruptly when jealousy over Zodicus's virility led to his banishment, the court reeking of favoritism's bitter aftertaste. Medical analysis of these behaviors suggests possible intersex conditions or gender dysphoria, terms anachronistic but illuminating when applied to Elagabalus's reported offers for castration and vaginal construction, procedures beyond contemporary capabilities but indicative of deep-seated identity conflict, exacerbated by his role as high priest of Elagabal, where rituals involved dancing in feminine garb around the black meteorite stone transported to Rome, the temple on the Palatine Hill, becoming a site of syncretic worship that alienated Jupiter's adherents. Contemporary diplomatic record from Parthian envoys expressing bewilderment at the emperor's womanly ways. Politically, these dysfunctions undermined his authority, as Elagabalus's prostitution in palace brothels, painting his face, soliciting patrons for payment, and boasting of numerous lovers, drained imperial coffers through rewards to favorites, sparking economic discontent that fueled senatorial plots, while his 5 marriages to women, including the sacrilegious union with Vestal Virgin Aeneia Aurelia Faustina after executing her husband, provoked religious outrage. The air in the forum thick with murmurs of impending divine retribution. Collateral victims included his wives, discarded in rapid succession amid postpartum complications or perceived infidelities, and subjects burdened by taxes funding his excesses, court physicians like the reluctant observers who documented his surgical pleas in private journals later unearthed in archaeological digs, their accounts preserving the human toll. As deterioration accelerated, Paranoia isolated Elagabalus, surrounding himself with sycophants while dismissing competent advisors. Desperate measures, including forced circumcisions on courtiers to align with Assyrian rites. The palace halls echoing with coerced compliance until 222 AD, when his grandmother orchestrated his assassination by the Praetorian Guard. The 18-year-old emperor and his mother Julia Simius slain in a latrine, their bodies dragged through streets and cast into the Tiber. Dio describing the mutilation of Elagabalus's corpse to symbolize the rejection of his gender transgressions. Aftermath disclosures in the Historia Augusta, albeit sensationalized, expanded the narrative with claims of Elagabalus's offers for emasculation to mimic female anatomy. Historical cover-ups under Severus Alexander, sanitizing records through damnatio memoriae. Yet preserved evidence in coinage depicting the emperor with feminine features and epigraphic inscriptions from temples attest to the scandal's veracity, his intimate failures precipitating dynastic shifts and reinforcing Roman prejudices against Eastern influences. Reflecting on these emperors' degradations connects ancient taboos to perennial human frailties, where power amplifies private torments into public catastrophes. The scandals proliferated under earlier rulers like Tiberius, who retreated to Capri in 26 AD, transforming the island into a den of debauchery where boy concubines, termed spintrii for their acrobatic sexual feats, were procured from across the empire, trained in erotic arts that involved chain formations and oral simulations. Suetonius detailing how the aging emperor, afflicted with ulcerous skin lesions from possible syphilis, manifesting as festering sores exuding pus with a putrid stench. Watch these youths perform in gardens lush with imported flora, the air humid with sea spray mingling with the sharp odors of bodily fluids. His psychological isolation stemming from paranoia over plots in Rome, leading to seclusion where he indulged unchecked. Medical records from court physicians hinting at laudanum dependency to dull chronic pain, exacerbating hallucinations that blurred boundaries between spectator and participant. Tiberius's dysfunctions impacted governance through absenteeism, delegating to ruthless prefects like Sejanus who exploited the vacuum for purges, collateral damage afflicting the boys themselves, many discarded when outgrowing appeal, their fates ranging from suicide to exile. One account from Pliny the Elder in his Natural History, alluding to a villa grotto adapted for aquatic orgies where youths swam as little fishes nibbling at the emperor's groin, a grotesque metaphor for exploitation. Escalation involved increasingly extreme concealments, with Capri's cliffs serving as execution sites for disfavored concubines hurled to rocks below, the waves crashing with bone-shattering force, until Tiberius's death in 37 AD from smothering, possibly orchestrated by successor Caligula. Amid gasps for air, his body autopsied revealing advanced venereal disease that had ravaged internal organs. Historical sanitization by Flavian historians downplaying the scandals to legitimize their rule. Yet, preserved mosaics from Capri villas depict the acts, offering tangible evidence of the hidden sufferings that eroded imperial prestige. Caligula's reign from 37 AD introduced fresh horrors, his early benevolence masking a post-illness delirium where he elevated his horse Incitatus to senatorial status, but extended affections to boy concubines selected for resemblance to deities, subjecting them to ritualistic deflowerings in temples. The air sacred with incense now profaned by the metallic scent of virginal blood on marble altars. Suetonius, quoting the emperor's boasts at banquets of incestuous unions with sisters that paralleled his exploitation of youths, psychological deterioration attributed to encephalitis swelling the brain and inducing megalomania. Medical abnormalities included temporal lobe epilepsy triggering seizures during acts, convulsing amid the boys' terrified embraces, attempts at concealment involving Praetorian silencers who executed witnesses, paranoia culminating in arbitrary cruelties like forcing senators to procure their sons for the imperial bed. The political fallout bankrupting families and inciting conspiracies that ended with Caligula's stabbing in 41 AD. his blood pooling in palace tunnels as guards extended the slaughter to his family. Post-mortem examinations revealing cerebral lesions, confirming the neurological basis for his aberrations, preserved in Galen's later commentaries, linking personal maladies to the dynasty's volatility. These interconnected scandals, from Nero's mutilation of Sporus to Elagabalus's surgical quests and the depravities of Tiberius and Caligula, unveil a pattern of royal dysfunction where anatomical alterations and intimate exploitations undermine the empire's moral fabric. Sensory details of palace chambers thick with the mingled sense of luxury and decay, underscoring the irony of godlike rulers reduced to base impulses. Contemporary sources like Philo's embassy to Gaius decrying the boy-loving emperors as harbingers of decline. Psychological analyses draw parallels to modern understandings of trauma-induced compulsions, where childhood losses, like Nero's maternal manipulations or Elagabalus's priestly upbringing, festered into adult pathologies, political consequences manifesting in revolts and successions that reshaped Rome, collateral victims spanning from castrated youths to executed spouses, their hidden sufferings etched in fragmentary letters and archaeological remnants like phallic amulets from brothels. As deterioration patterns emerged across reigns, desperate remedies ranged from herbal aphrodisiacs laced with cantharides, inducing blistering inflammations, to surgical interventions by Greek physicians whose treatises on eunuchism influenced Byzantine practices, isolation breeding further madness as emperors withdrew from public scrutiny. Final collapses marked by assassinations that exposed the rotting core of power. Post-death revelations, often amplified in hostile biographies to justify regime changes, were tempered by cover-ups like the erasure of inscriptions, yet enduring evidence in Vatican manuscripts and Pompeian graffiti preserves the truths, connecting these ancient grotesqueries to timeless admonitions about authority's corrosive whisper. Returning to that shadowed bedchamber where Nero's gaze first ensnared Sporus in a web of mutilation and mockery, now illuminated by these unearthed truths, one discerns how Rome's boy concubine scandals, festering amalgam of castration scars, forced veils, and imperial delusions, resonate through centuries, cautioning that beneath the laurels of conquest lie the fragile anatomies of humanity. Vulnerable to power's distorting grip, a haunting vision of thrones encircled by the ghosts of violated youth, their silent accusations enduring in the annals of time.